Our last section, 13.5, is factoring by grouping, another way we can factor our polynomials. So factoring by grouping means we are going to start with our equation and we are going to group it into two separate parts. So if I rewrite my equation, x cubed plus 3x squared plus 6x plus 18, and I'm going to add some parentheses to group it into two separate problems. So if I have x cubed plus 3x squared and I find the greatest common factor of just this piece, take x cubed and 3x squared, I have 3 x's up here and 2 x's down here. I can take out 2 x's from this first term. So I would have x squared on the outside, and I would be left with x plus 3 on the inside. Then I would add on, I'm going to take this second piece and split it up. So if I have 6x and 18, I can take my greatest common factor, I'd get 3 times 2 times x. And down here, 18, I would get 6 times 3. And I could split that up even further. I would get 2 times 3 times 3. If I look, I have 2 and 3 in both of those. 2 times 3 is 6, so I could pull out a 6 from both of those, and I would be left with an x on this one and a 3 on this one. So on the inside, I would get x plus 3. Now if you notice, I have x plus 3 in both of these factoring groups. So I can take that x plus 3 as a greatest common factor and pull this out to the front. Sorry, x plus 3. So I took this and this from both of my pieces and pulled it out to the front. Then I have what's left. On the inside, I have this piece plus this piece left inside my parentheses. So that gives me x squared plus 6. And that is how I get my answer by factoring by grouping. So let's look at another one. The basic process is that I'm just pulling out my greatest common factor 3 times. So again, if I rewrite my equation, 3x cubed minus x squared plus 18x minus 6. I'm going to group those up into two different parts. If I start with 3x cubed and x squared, I see I can pull out 2 x's from each one of those. So if I have an x squared out front, that leaves me with 3x minus 1. Okay, because I have a 1 out front here. Then my 18x, that is 6 times 3 times x, and I could keep splitting that up, but my 6 is just 6 times 1. So I have a 6 in both of these, and I can pull that out front. That leaves me with 3x, my first term, and minus 1 as my second term. So now I have the same term for both of these groups. If I take 3x minus 1 as my greatest factor and pull it out front, that leaves me with x squared plus 6 as my other term. And I'm just taking what's left in front of each of those factors. And that is my answer. Okay, so let's do one more. Rewrite with grouping as my first step. Now I need to be careful in this second part because when I rewrite with grouping, I need to include that minus sign in my grouping. So when I group, I'm always going to have a plus sign in the middle, and my minus sign up here is going to go with that 5x. So I'm going to write it like this. Okay, so now if I look at this first one, I have 3 x's in my first term and 2 x's in my second term. If I take 2 x's away from both of those, I'm left with 1x in my first term. And remember, I have a 1 out front here, so it's 1 times x times x. So I still have that 1 on the inside. So my next set of terms is a little trick here because I have that negative sign. I want to pull that negative sign out first. So if I pull that negative sign out of my term, both my terms there, I would get negative. I would have my 5x, but then my sign in the middle here, I'm pulling a negative out of both of these terms, so this is going to turn to a negative as well. If I pull a negative 1 out of both of those terms, then this sign in the middle changes to a negative. So then once I got those signs taken care of, I'm going to pull out my greatest common factor, which I have 5 in both of those terms. So if I pull out a 5, I'm left with x, and if I pull out a 5 from this term, I'm left with 1. Because remember, if I split 5 up into its factor tree, I have 5 times 1. So that 1 is still left. So now I'm left with the same term in both of them. So I'm going to pull my greatest common factor for the third time. This is my greatest common factor, x minus 1. And I am left with an x squared minus 5x. Not 5x, just 5. Okay, and that is my final answer.